having the ability to reach into self-sacrifice. And it's a concept that unfortunately is lost to a lot of people. And also the concept of training our children in this idea of Mesiras Nefesh. And every year we have the tremendous chus to have Rabbi Shlomo Goldberg from Orlia to address us on this important day. And as I mentioned when we were reciting the keynotes and discussing the concepts of Rabbi Cheskel Sarna, Zeichat Tzaddik V'Bracha, I brought up how fortunate we are to have special people in our community like Rabbi Goldberg who are investing their lives with Mesiras Nefesh, and of course that's the ultimate way to inculcate these ideas into our children is by living it and being the role model for that. And I could think of no one better than Rabbi Goldberg who embodies that idea. And that's why he's so beloved to so many people. And I'd like to thank Rabbi Goldberg. I apologize for some of the miscommunication that took place, but we are fortunate once again, as he does for many, many years, that he comes and gives us his very, very valuable time and his beautiful words of wisdom to share with us on this Tisha. Rabbi Goldberg.
Rabbi Summers. First of all, there was no miscommunication. I just couldn't find the flyer in the emissary's email. And when I went on the website, it only went back to Chukas. So I thought maybe there's something about Mashiach coming that I didn't know. And I wanted to check that out. I'd also like to thank the Rav for the beautiful explanation of the keynotes as he does every year. In addition, in the course of those keynotes, recalling Rabbi Sheikh, Zeichat Tzaddik V'Bracha. And I hope that the efforts that Rabbi Summers makes in the shul, and not in particular, but in addition to what he accomplishes in this on Tisha B'Av with his explanations, and for the day of learning and understanding that he sponsors, that it should be a schus for him and for his family, and a source for Aliyas Neshama for his mother, Rabbi Shlomo. There's a yeshiva and a college in the United States which is called Yeshiva University. One of the great founders and the Rav, the most famous, of that institution was Rav Soloveitchik. There's a certain amount of controversy, which I don't really understand, that involves him. I was recently with one of my Rebbeim, Reb Noah Horlowick, and he told me the following Maisa. It's a Maisa that I heard that he added on an explanation. The Maisa was that when Rav Soloveitchik was towards the Zeichat Tzaddik V'Bracha was towards the end of his life, he unfortunately had some sort of, not sure if it was Alzheimer's, but some sort of disease that affected his memory. And it happened that his daughter came to visit him. And at that point, he couldn't recognize family members. So when his daughter came into the room, he looked at her and he said, "I don't know your name, I don't know who you are, but I can tell that you're a Bas Talmid Chacham." So Rabbi Orlowick heard this story, and he said he consulted with someone he knew who was a well-known neurologist. And he asked him, how could that be? That he could not remember her face, but he could remember that he could recognize that she was a Bas Talmid Chacham. So the neurologist explained that it must be that for Rav Soloveitchik, Zeichat Tzaddik V'Bracha, the Rambam's explanation of what constitutes a Bas Talmid Chacham, the daughter of a Talmid Chacham, must have been placed in his brain in a deeper place than even the face of his own daughter. That's how real the Rambam was to him. In fact, he writes that when he was a child, there were, as a young boy, what he remembered was his father, Moshe Soloveitchik. He remembered him being in a room, and there were other students who were there, and there was someone who was called the Rambam, who was always in danger. The Rambam was in danger because he was being attacked by other people, and it was his father's duty to protect him. And that's how he grew up, was that he had this feeling that in this room, the Rambam is always being threatened. And one time his father couldn't come up with a resolution for the attacks on the Rambam, and he went running to his mother crying that Tati can't save the Rambam. So if you grow up in that kind of house, it's a little bit different than us mortal human beings. So Rabbi Orlowek heard that his understanding of a Bas Talmud Chacham from the Rambam was in a deeper place than his own daughter's face. And that's why he could recognize that, but he couldn't recognize her face. So whatever various opinions there might have been about him, so those went out the window. It's like, don't mess. So I happen to have a kinos. I know that the Rav doesn't say you should buy nice kinos because you're not going to need them. So, but I saw that there's one that has the commentary of Rav Soloveitchik, Zecher Tzadok V'Bracha. And in the introduction, there is a story about, well, I guess one of his students, who was present in Tel Aviv in the Tisha B'Av following the Six-Day War. And the atmosphere in Eretz Yisrael at the time was not very Tisha B'Av-like, because they had just won, the few had defeated the many, and there was a spirit of courage and excitement and almost invincibility in the heart of the people. And he went to the shul. He said Reb Goren, who was then the chief rabbi or former chief rabbi, read Eicha. They started to say kinos, and everybody got up and left because it wasn't shaykh. Because they said kinos on Tisha B'Av, people got up and left. So the person who's writing the story said it bothered him very much. And then the next year, in '68, so Reb Soloveitchik gave a speech. He wasn't addressing this particular event that happened, but he was trying to put things, well, how do we understand Tisha B'Av after 1967, after the Six-Day War? And one of the things he said was, he brought an interesting Rambam, which I don't know which Rambam it was, it doesn't mention. But he asked a question which I never really thought about before. The question is, what did the Jews do between Churban Bayis Rishon and the Churban Bayis Sheni? Did they keep Tisha B'Av? That's something I never thought of before, that child. What did they do? So the Rav had a raya, I don't know what it was, but he had a raya from the Rambam, that in fact they kept Tisha B'Av. So the question is, how did they keep it? He said to believe that the Yidden would go to the Beis HaMikdash and they would bring the korbanos and they would have the avoda, because the Beis HaMikdash was around, the Bayis Sheni was there, to say that they would have all the avoda in the Beis HaMikdash and at the same time go through the rituals that we have of Tisha B'Av, because it doesn't make any sense. So he posited that the way that Tisha B'Av was kept during Bayis Sheni was that it was a Yom Tefillah. It was a day of Tefillah. And what was the nature of that day of Tefillah? The nature was that the Jews were davening that what had happened before wouldn't happen again. That was the way Tisha B'Av was kept in Bayis Sheni. That they had, in not too distant memory, had a picture of the destruction of the first temple. And in Bayis Sheni, they also kept Tisha B'Av as a Yom Tefillah, davening that what happened in the Bayis Rishon would not happen to the Bayis Sheni. And he quotes Rav Soloveitchik as saying the ghost of the Bayis Rishon could be felt in the Bayis Sheni. There was always that feeling, looking over their shoulder, that it's possible that it could happen again. So we know that we are here 70 years after many commemorations this year, 70 years after the end of World War II. And we've seen a revival of Yiddishkeit in the world, which is truly miraculous, truly miraculous. From the destruction of 6 million to within 70 years having a situation in which there are more people studying Torah at any time since the time of the Mishnah. Since Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, there have never been so many people learning Torah. And we live in a period of time which has relative prosperity. Even those who might find themselves living in very serious financial situations still find themselves living better than most of the people in the world ever lived. Yet I think we can say that we can also look back and still feel the ghost of the Holocaust still amongst us. And it's been 70 years and 70 years of miraculous accomplishment. And yet we have to be wondering that on our Tisha B'Av, we also have to be davening that it shouldn't happen again. And if we look at if a person makes I guess it's a mistake, maybe not, it's a partial mistake, of listening to the news or reading the newspapers. They don't exist anymore, newspapers, or wherever he gets his news. He makes that mistake. So it really does sound like 1938 all over again. 1938, there was a Neville Chamberlain who said that he met with Chancellor Hitler, Yimach Shemo, and he came back with the signed document, and he said, we will have peace in our time, of the great appeasers. And we find ourselves in a situation with another great appeaser. We live in a world in which, if anybody remembers the book 1984, so George Orwell wrote about a country in which everything was the opposite. The ministry of truth was dealt with falsehood. So there are many parallels. And there's one thing that doesn't parallel. I recommend to everyone, if you can buy it, it recently came out, that Hanoch Teller has a book called Heroic Children. It's the stories of 6 or 7 children who survived the Holocaust and their experiences in the war. And it is compelling reading. And one of the themes that's throughout that book is that the Jews were duped into believing the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, for 2 reasons. One, they couldn't believe that the things that they were hearing could actually be perpetrated by other human beings onto other human beings. And the fact that they had lost hope of all other things and just their desire to believe in the positive. The Germans were expert at convincing the Jews and other people that they weren't doing anything terrible. They convinced the Jews, they convinced the Red Cross, they had propaganda videos that made the concentration camps look like it was Camp Romamu. They did what they could to hide what they were doing. We now have an enemy that goes out of its way to explain to us in grisly detail how terrible what they plan to do is. So at the time of the Holocaust, they could say, we didn't know, we didn't realize, we never could have imagined. Now we can imagine. And if in case we couldn't imagine it, the enemy is letting us know exactly what their plans are. And the problem is, if we keep that feeling in our mind and in our heart, that we don't want it to happen again. It's only been 70 years. So we have to realize that although it's probably a good idea to do what we can as far as influencing the government and taking political action and being aware of what's happening in the news, those are probably good things to do. They're not the essential thing to do. The essential thing to do, if we believed everything that we read in the keynotes just a few minutes ago, if we believe those things, that we know that really it's all our fault. Hakol b'shvil Yisrael. Everything that's happening is because of us. And that we can really do, and maybe the only thing we can really do, is to try to change. There are things in the world which one author says can be classified as being in the circle of concern. Circle of concern are those things we're concerned about, those things we're worried about, the economy, the situation in the Middle East, the Dodgers. There are things that people are concerned about. And then there are those things that a person can influence. The commonality of the things that they can influence is that they are all things that have to do with ourselves. They're all internal things. I might be concerned about other people's midos, but I can influence my own. I might be concerned about what other people are thinking, but I can control my own thoughts. And while it probably is worthwhile to be aware of what's happening in the world just so we can remain informed, and that perhaps it's an inspiration even for us to change, we have to know that the essential element of what is necessary for us to do, if we do not want to repeat or allow to be repeated what happened only 70 years ago, it's not a very long time. And it seems that it's deja vu all over again, is that we have to make some changes. And it could be that the changes we have to make, of course, if we look at the totality of society and the totality of the situation, they might seem quite large. But I think that we have to start somewhere. And therefore, my goal this morning is to perhaps leave us with one area, which I think in terms of leverage, leverage in economics and in physics means that you can use a small amount of effort to effect a great change. So in terms of leverage, I think if we could work on this particular midah, that it would be something that would help us to lift a lot, to change a lot, and then we could truly influence the world, our inner world, and then afterwards, through a trickle-up theory, to allow it to affect the greater world. And make it much less likely, therefore, that the atrocities that at the end of Kinos that we mentioned from Schwab and the others, the Baba Rebbe and others who wrote Kinos, that they won't happen again. And to do so, I'd like to take a look at an approach of Rabbi Akiva. I did make sheets for anyone who'd like to follow along. I'll translate, they're in Hebrew, but I'll translate as we go along. I wanted to bring to you 3 different places in which Rabbi Akiva seems to have had a totally different response to difficult situations than his chaverim, than the other chachamim. If you'll take a look at number 1, this is a medrash in Eicha Rabbah on the pasuk Al Har Tzion Sheshamem, on Har Tzion which was destroyed, which is desolate. The medrash says, Ukfar haya Rabban Gamliel v'Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah v'Rebbe Yehoshua v'Rebbe Akiva nichnosim l'Romi, that these chachamim went to the city of Rome. Ushamu kol hamona shel roimei hapot le'ailus ad mea v'esrim mil. And they heard the wailing, there's a positive wailing, a crying out of the armies of Rome that extended for 120 miles. Hischiluhim boichim, so the other chachamim were crying, v'Rebbe Akiva mesachek. But Rabbi Akiva was laughing. So the other chachamim were crying, Rabbi Akiva was laughing. Amru, Akiva, they said Akiva, anu bochim v'atam mesachek. We're crying and you're laughing. Amar lehem, va'atem, and you, lama bechisem, why did you cry? Amru lo nivke, we shouldn't cry. Shahagoyim odim avos kochavim lahavin b'shtachavim va'atzbeihoin v'yoshavim betach v'sha'an v'shalva. We see the goyim who worship idols, that they are sitting quietly and peacefully and with security as they're continuing to worship their idols. And on the other hand, ubeis hadon raglav elokeinu hayolas reifas eish, and the footstool of our God has become a burning fire, umador l'chayas asade, in a place where wild animals go and live. V'lo nivke. We see that the bad guys are winning and are happy and secure and rejoicing. And look what's happened to our Beis HaMikdash. Look what's happened to our people. And we shouldn't cry? So Amar Lehem, Rabbi Akiva said to them, L'kach ani mesachek. You know what? That's exactly why I'm laughing. Because he donned a kal v'chomer. He said, Im kein l'machisov, if that's the way Hashem treats those who anger him, kal v'chomer l'osei ritzoynai. Imagine the security and the happiness and the goodness that he has in wait for those who do his will. If that's how Hashem treats the bad guys, imagine what he has in store for the good guys. So therefore he was laughing, because he was picturing that world that Hashem would have waiting for those who are osei ritzoynai. I'd like to skip down to number 2. I'll go back to the middle. This is a Gemara Masechta Sanhedrin. Amar Rabba bar Chana, Kashachala Rabbi Eliezer, when Rabbi Eliezer was seriously ill, Nichnasu Talmidav Levagrei. His Talmidim came to visit him. Amar Lehen, he said to them, Chama Aza Yesh Ba'olam. There's a strong sun in the sky, which Rashi says means that there was a time of great Midas Hadin, because he was very ill. He was being judged. Hischilu hen boichin. So again, the Chaverim of Rabbi Akiva are crying, for Rabbi Akiva misachek, and Rabbi Akiva is laughing. Amrulo, they said to him, Lama ata misachek, why are you laughing? Amar lehen, he said to them, Ki mipnei ma atem bochim, why are you crying? Amrulo, they said to him, Efshar Sefer Torah Shorui B'tzar, our Rebbe, who is a living Sefer Torah, he's immersed in pain, v'lo nivke, and we shouldn't cry? Amar lehen, he said to them, Lakach, for that very reason, ani misachek. That's exactly why I'm laughing. Kol zman shani roe Rebbe, as long as I saw that our Rebbe, she'ein yeno machmitz, that his wine never turns to vinegar, ve'ein pishtano loike, and his flax always grows and is never smitten with blight, ve'ein shmeino mavish, and his oil does not become ruined, spoiled, ve'ein duvshano madvish, and his honey does not become sour. As long as everything was going well for him, as it has his entire life. Amarti, I said, Shema chas v'sholom kibel Rebbe Olomai. Maybe our Rebbe is getting his schar in Olam Hazeh, because he lived a life in which he was always successful. Things didn't go wrong. Va'akshav shani roe Rebbe b'tzar. Now that I see that our Rebbe is in pain, ani sameach. I see that I don't have to worry that he's being paid back in this world, that it's taking away from his Olam Haba to pay him in this world. I know that his schar will be shalem in Olam Haba. So when Rabbi Eliezer heard this, Amar Lo, he said to Rabbi Akiva, Akiva, klum chisarti min haTorah kula? I'm being punished? Is there anything that I did wrong? Did I leave out anything from the entire Torah? So Rabbi Akiva said back to him, Amar Lo, Limadatanu Rabbeinu, you yourself, Rebbe, taught us, Ki Adam ein tzadik ba'aretz asher ya'as toiv v'lo yechet. There's no such thing, even the greatest tzaddik, who lives his whole life and does only the good and does not sin. So, for whatever avera there might have been, Hashem has paid you back in this world, and therefore I'm laughing because I'm picturing the world that you will have waiting for you in Olam Haba. That's number 2. Let's go back to the middle case. This is a continuation of the medrash. Pamacheres, there was yet another time. Hayu olim liYerushalayim. This medrash appears at the end of Masechta Makos as well. Slightly different, but basically the same. Pamacheres hayu olim liYerushalayim v'higiu l'tzayfim. They reached Har Tzayfim, and as is the halacha of Akoru Bigdehem, at that point where they could see the Makom HaMikdash, they tore their clothes. V'higiu l'Har Abayis. And they reached the Har Abayis, Oru Shu'al Echad Yotze Mibeis Kodshei HaKadoshim. And they saw a fox that was running out of the former Holy of Holies, the Kodshei HaKadoshim. What happened? Hischilu him boichim. They began to cry. And then here he goes again. V'Rabbi Akiva misachik. And Rabbi Akiva's laughing. Amru lo Akiva. Lo olam atam metama aleinu. You're always doing this, they told him. We're always wondering about you. We're always crying, and you're always laughing. What's with you? Amar lehem, he said to them, Atem lama atem boichin. Why are you crying? Amru lo, v'lov nivke mokom shekosu bo. Should we not cry over the place that the pasuk says, Hazar hakarav yumas? That a zar, a non-Kohen, who would go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, so he would die, Misi B'idei Shemayim, V'harei Shu'al Yotzei Mitzaychai, and we find a fox running out of there. V'olav Neskayim HaPasuk, and it's also a fulfillment of the Pasuk, Har Tzion Sheshomeim, Shu'olim Hochuba. The desolate Har Abayis, foxes are running through it. Amru Lahem, Amar Lahem, Guess what? That's the exact same reason that I'm laughing. Because the fox is running through there, that's exactly why I'm laughing. Harehu Omer, there's a pasuk in Yeshaya. The pasuk in Yeshaya says, Ve'idali edim ne'emonim es Uriah HaKohen ve'es Zechariyahu ben Yevarechayahu. And I'm going to mention these two people, Zechariah and Uriah. V'kima inyan Uriah etzel Zechariah. So the Gemara wants to know, what in relation does Uriah have to Zechariah? Uriah b'mikdash rishon, v'Zechariah b'mikdash sheni. They were in two different batei mikdash. So why are they mentioned together in the pasuk? Eloma amar Uriah. What did Uriah say? He said, Ko amar Hashem tzavakos Tzion sodeh ticharesh. That Tzion will be plowed up like a field. V'Yerushalayim im tihiyeh, and Yerushalayim will be destroyed like an island. Uma amar Zechariah. And what did Zechariah say? The opposite. Od yeshvu zakenim luzakenos berachovos Yerushalayim ve'ish meshanto biyodoi mirov yomim. That there will come a time where there will be elderly men and elderly women in the streets of Yerushalayim. I was happy to hear that because recently we went to a particular place and I was given a senior citizens discount. So I was happy to hear that the old people will be still alive in Yerushalayim, and they'll have their canes in their hand because of the amazing old age that they will have. Ukasiv basrein, it says afterwards, Urochovos ha'ir yumolu yolodim v'yolodos mesachakim b'rochovoseho. And there will also be young girls and young boys who are playing in the streets. And this is a little bit more of an explanation than we find in the Gemara in Makos. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Harei li shnei edim elu. I have these two witnesses. Ve'im kayamim divrei Uriah, yeh kayamim divrei Zechariah. If the negative prophecy of Uriah about that Tzion would be like a plowed field, if that is fulfilled, then divrei Zechariah will also be fulfilled. Ve'im yavatlu divrei Uriah, but if the words of Uriah don't happen, then yavatlu divrei Zechariah. Then the words of Zechariah about the old people and the young people again rejoicing in Yerushalayim will also not be fulfilled. And therefore I was happy. Sheniskayim divrei Uriah, because now I know the words of Uriah were fulfilled. Ulubesof divrei Zechariah asidin lehiskayim. And therefore I know that eventually the words of Zechariah will be fulfilled as well. Ubeloshen hazeh amru lo. And now Chazal take the time to point out to us how the Chachamim responded to Rabbi Akiva. And they said to him, Beloshen hazeh amru lo, Akiva nichamtanu. Akiva, you have given us nechama. You have comforted us. The Gemara in Makos says that they repeated it twice. They said, Akiva nichamtanu, Akiva nichamtanu. In the measures it says, Akiva nichamtanu, tisnachem baragle mevaser. And you should be comforted since you were the one who was the bearer of good news. So the good news that you brought to us should be reflected back on you, and you should have nechama as well. So my question is the following. Why did the Gemara have to go out of its way to tell us that the Chachamim said, after these examples of Rabbi Akiva always laughing while they're crying, why did the Gemara have to go out of its way to say that you, Akiva, are giving us nechama? And number two, what does nechama have to do with the fact that Rabbi Akiva was laughing? What does laughing have to do with nechama? And why was it pointed out that it seems as a result of his laughing that's what enabled them to achieve some sort of comfort even in the face of disaster? So to answer this question, if you would turn over the page to number 3. This I saw in the writings of Reb Shimshon Pinkus, which the Rav quoted several times during the explanation of the Kinos. The pasuk says that Yitzchak Avinu, he went to L'suach B'Sadeh, which more in Brachas learns out that that's where we learn Tefillos Mincha. The Medrash says that he was conversing in the field, Vayetze Yitzchak, that he went out to converse in the field. The Gemara asks, Mehechan Yotza, where did he go out from? The Gemara says, Migan Eden, that he came out from Gan Eden. And when Rivka Imenu saw Yitzchak who had just come out of Gan Eden, her response was, Vatipol me ala gamal. She either fell off or she went immediately down from the camel. It seems that she was stunned by what she saw to the point that it knocked her off the camel. Why was that? So the Medrash in Vayikra Rabbah explains, and we learn this out from the situation where Shaul HaMelech, after Shmuel Hanavi had died, and he had himself wiped out all the sorcerers, felt he had no place to go to figure out what Hashem wants from him next, how to divine what should be his next action should be. So he found one woman who was still a sorceress. He assured her that she would not be killed like the others, and she conjured up the spirit of Shmuel Hanavi. And when Shmuel Hanavi came, the pasuk says she immediately knew that the man who had requested this of her was none other than Shaul. So the Gemara, the Medrash says, Mona yada bahi shaita dehu Shaul. How did she know right then that he must be Shaul HaMelech? How did the fact that seeing Shmuel, how did that reveal to her that he must be Shaul? Ela Amru, they said, Lo kashuhu oila lehedyot oila lemelech. When a person's neshama is conjured up from Gan Eden, it doesn't appear the same way before a king as it does before a regular person. Lehedyot, to a regular person, oila rosho lemata v'raglov lemala. It comes head down, feet up. But lemelech, when Shmuel came down, he was Ragov Lamata, Varosho Lamala. He came right side up. So it had to be that this was a king. Because a normal person who comes down from Gan Eden comes down upside down. Why is that? Because Olam Haba, Gan Eden, is a world which is upside down from our world. It's a world which has a different perspective. I forgot to bring it, but the Gemara mentions a particular Amora who had an Amora who had an out-of-body, near-death experience, and his neshama went to Gan Eden, and when he came back to life, his father asked him, what did you see? He said, I saw an upside-down world, an Olam Hafuch. I saw an upside-down world. Those who were big down here were small up there. Those who were small down here were big up there. His father asked him, how about Talmidei Chachamim? How about Chaverim, people like us? He said they were the same. Because they see the world as it is. But for everybody else, you go to Gan Eden, you see an upside-down world. It's totally different. It is a completely different perspective. So I'd like to suggest to you that it's the nature of having a different perspective, a truthful perspective, or even just a different and true perspective. That's what makes a person laugh. I'll give you an example from a joke. How do jokes work? The reason that jokes work is because a person has a perspective of how it's supposed to be. And when they hear the punchline of the joke, they have a different perspective. Now it's Tisha B'Av. I can't tell jokes. So what I'll do is I'll tell you a bad joke. Okay? So that way hopefully I won't violate anything. But it's just for the point of illustrating how a joke is a change in perspective. A person says, I just flew in from Las Vegas, and boy, are my arms tired. That's a bad joke. For those people who think it's funny, why is it funny? Because flying in from Las Vegas means I took an airplane. And this person says, I just flew in from Las Vegas, my arms are tired, so he flapped his arms to get here. So you're thinking that flying means in an airplane, and the joke is that no, flying means under his own power. That's what makes it funny. And if you think of any joke, one perhaps that you do think is funny, you will see that what makes the punchline a punchline is that it changes a perspective. So I would suggest that when the Gemara says that Rabbi Akiva was misachek, everybody else is crying and Rabbi Akiva's laughing. Why is he laughing? Because he has a bit of the Tam Gan Eden in him. And he sees things from a different vantage point. He sees them from a different perspective. So they see that Rabbi Eliezer is in Sar, and they're having the natural response, which is to cry, and he's got a different vision, and he says, now I'm secure in the fact that Hashem is not taking away from his Olam Haba by rewarding him in this world. I hear the armies of Rome for 120 miles, they're Ovdei Avodah Zarah, and they're celebrating, and look at the situation with the Beis HaMikdash. Rabbi Akiva has a different perspective. If Hashem has such patience and kindness towards those who make him angry, imagine what he has in store for those who are Oseh Ritzonai. You see a fox coming out of the Makom Kadosh HaKadoshim, and you're crying? I'm seeing the fulfillment of the Nevuah of Uriah, which means that the Nevuah of Zechariah cannot be far away. He has a totally different way of looking at things. In a way, he gets the joke. He sees the difference in perspective, and therefore he's mesachek. Because if we just look at the situation the way it's presented to us in our narrow way of thinking, so then we're stuck. The person who can laugh, the Rebbe Akiva, is the one who has the ability to change his mind, to see things differently, to gain a broader, a deeper, and a more truthful perspective. And for that reason, his fellow Chachamim told him, Akiva nichamtanu. You gave us nechama. Because the pshat in the word nechama means to change the way you look at things. The haraya, if you look at number 5, in speaking about the generations leading up to the Dor HaMabul, the pasuk says, "Vayinachem Hashem ki asa es ha'adam ba'aretz." Literally, we would say Hashem regretted that he created man in the world, in the earth. Rashi says, "Vayinachem Hashem ki asa nachama hoysal lefonav." It was a source of comfort for Hashem. What was the comfort? That Hashem said, at least I had the sense to create man on the earth, b'tachtonim. She'ilu hayamin ha'elyonim, because if I had created man in the elyonim, like the malachim, hayamam ridon, he would have encouraged them to rebel also. So rebellious is a human being, that at least I created him on the earth, where his damage is limited. Had I created him in Shemayim, so that he would have convinced the angels to rebel against me, and then I really would have had a problem on my hands. So what does it mean, Vayinachem Hashem? He changed his perspective. It's a big problem what's happening with human beings on the earth. But you know what? Could have been worse. At least there's a silver lining. The rebellious activities could have even been worse. Nechama means to change the outlook of a person. As Rashi says, on the pasuk that we'll read this afternoon, Lama yonru Mitzrayim leimor bera'ah hotziam laharoigosam beharim lochaloisom me'al pnei ha'adamah shuv mecharon apecha, return from your anger, vehinachem al hara'ah le'amecha. Rashi, vehinachem hisases makshava acheres. Make a different thought. Think about them differently. Don't destroy them. Think differently about them, lehetiv lehem, and do good for them. Nechama means to change the way a person thinks. This gives us, by the way, a different understanding in the meaning of nichum avelim lo aleinu. The duty of a person who's being menachem and avel is to help to give him a different perspective, so that he doesn't remain in that feeling where he can't breathe, where the heaviness of the Avelis so overtakes him. That it's a different perspective, to give him hope, to give him a sense that there's a future worth living for. That's the duty of a person who's menachem and avel. And I don't know if I saw it somewhere, but it could be that that's the relationship between the word avel, a person who's a mourner, and the word aval. The word aval means but. In the situation that he's in, it's a terrible situation, but there's a techiyas amazing. But you can help the person through your mitzvahs in the din that they're having in Shemayim. But we know, as I read recently, that Rav Aaron Kotler, when he was about to pass away, he told his family, "Don't worry, I'm in good hands." An avel is a vow. It's to try to give, it looks desperate right now, a vow, but there's a hope for the future. So Rabbi Akiva, who was the one who knew how to laugh, because he had a different perspective, he was the one about whom his chaverim could say, Akiva nichamtanu, you gave us nechama. Because you're able to shift the map, the paradigm that you use to look at the world. You enable us to do that as well. And therefore, we owe you a debt of gratitude because you've truly brought us comfort. It's not just a superficial feeling good. It's something that is rooted in a true change of perspective. And that's a lesson, I think, that if we bring into our lives, we can use to leverage a lot of good in the relationships that we have with other people. We know that this Churban Bayis Sheni, was sinas chinam. Why does a person hate someone for no reason? They hate someone for no reason because they put them in a box. That person's in a box that they can't change, and they've decided who they are, and they've decided what they are, and you know what? I hate you. To get rid of sinas chinam, we have to have a sense of ahava that says that maybe we can judge this person from a different perspective. Maybe we can see them differently. If we want to change the relationships, and we're talking about the relationships we have with ourselves and with those who are closest to us, it means that we have to laugh in the way that Rabbi Akiva laughed, and we have to give comfort in the way that he gave comfort by changing our paradigm, by changing the picture, by changing the map that we've been following up until now. Everybody realizes that the axiom that they say in the world these days is true, that every organization is perfectly aligned to get the results that it's currently getting. That's for sure true. That's an axiom. That means if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. So if we're happy with what we're getting, then we should keep doing what we're doing. But if we feel perhaps that there is some improvement that could be made, then the only way that we can get a different result is by changing what it is that we're doing. We recognize that in the world of business. We recognize that if people are not buying our product, I heard that there's in Queens, that there's an ice cream store that sells cholent flavored ice cream. So if I try to open up such a store in Orange County, I could imagine it wouldn't go so well. So I could either tell myself one or two things. I can say, what do you expect from those people? What do they know? They don't know what's good. Or I could say, you know what, maybe I'll try chocolate chip or mint. You can change the formula, you can change the recipe. But if we keep giving the same recipe, and we keep doing the same things, and we expect a different result, somebody said that that's one of the definitions of insanity, is to do the same thing and expect a different result. Albert Einstein once said that it is impossible for us to solve significant problems if we remain at the same level of knowledge that we were at when we created them. We have some significant problems. The Jewish people as a whole, and many people as individuals, are facing significant problems. If we want to solve those problems, we have to get more knowledge. And I'd like to go a little bit further and say that it could even be that it's the knowledge, the limited knowledge itself, is partially a cause of the problem. It's because we don't have all the facts, because we put ourselves in a box, because we put other people in a box. That itself is what causes the problem. Because we expect them to be that way, guess what? They are. I remember there was a parent that came to me one time and said that I was telling my child, they did not do something that they were supposed to do. So the parent said, they said to the child, you are so totally irresponsible. So the child said back to the parent, well, what do you expect from an irresponsible person? Why'd you give me the job to begin with? You know, if I'm irresponsible, so if you circle the learning disabled person in this picture, you know I'm irresponsible, so why'd you give it to me? Kids did 20 or 30% better on their standardized test scores. They were actually just the same old students that everybody had had before. It's just that the teacher was convinced that they were geniuses, they had high IQ. So therefore he taught them as such, and therefore they became such. In the business world, they call this a paradigm shift. A paradigm is a map. So I was last week in Manhattan. I was trying to find my way around. You know, I went on Waze. I was looking for Manhattan, and I found out that there's a Manhattan, Ohio. So let's say I had Waze hooked to Manhattan, Ohio, and I'm trying to find my way around Manhattan, New York. So what am I going to get? Lost. What if I have people telling me that work harder, you know, just do it harder, put more effort in, but I'm following the map from Manhattan, Ohio? Am I going to still get lost? Sure. I'm just going to get lost faster because they're encouraging me. And what if at the same time they tell me how great I am, and we know you can do it, you know, and you're terrific? So then I'll get lost happier. But I'll still be lost. You know why I'm lost? Because I'm following the wrong map. I've got the wrong picture. And if we keep following a mistaken picture, then it's that limited level of knowledge which is causing the problem. Not only can we not solve problems at the same level of knowledge, we have to get more information, but it could be that the level of knowledge that we are at is causing the problem itself. And that's why someone once said that there are, his name was Sir Thomas Kuhn, who wrote a book, The Nature of Scientific Revolutions. He said that every great breakthrough was also a break with a previous way of thinking. If you want to break through, then sometimes you have to have a break with the way you were judging and thinking about things previously. Let me give you some examples. You know, there was a time when, in addition to running a school, I was also the Rav of a community. I refer to them as my days as a congregational rabbi, Aleichem Hashalom. And I think my Baal Batim probably feel the same way. So during those days, and even into the school years, I used to have a mistaken map, which you're going to be shocked that a person like me would believe this. But I used to believe that if people were upset at me, I believed that they were upset at me. Isn't that silly? I believed that if someone was upset, that they were mad at me. That was a big mistake. Because if you think that people are mad at you or they're attacking you, if you feel attacked, what are you going to do? You're going to defend yourself. And what's the best defense? A good offense. I later learned that most times the people were upset, they were really in pain. Mishat Soek, if a person's crying, it's mipnei shekoev lo. Something's hurting him. Now you tell me, if you think somebody is doing something because they don't like you and they're attacking you, so you're going to defend yourself, and the best defense is a good offense. How about if that person, you see him as not attacking you, but just as being someone who's in pain? What do you do with someone in pain? You call Hatzalah. You see what you can do to help. You understand that that's a total change in outlook. Instead of feeling that someone's after me, this person's in pain, something's hurting him. I happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, but it probably has very little to do with me. What can I do to help this person? The response is going to be totally different. If you'll take a look at the sheet, back at number 7 rather, someone gave me a gift. Maybe you might know him, Baruch Cohen. So he's cleaning out his garage. He found a whole box full of old Jewish Observers. Remember the Jewish Observer? The one that was put out of business by Mishpacha magazine. So the old Jewish Observers, many of the articles there were written by Gedolei Torah. I saw one from 1990 that was written by Rav Schwab. And the title of the article is that a parent, a father, and he says for a mother too, but he's talking to fathers mostly, need to change their paradigm of a father being someone who's a disciplinarian to being someone who is their child's best friend. And he brought a raya from this pasuk in number 7 by Yosef. V'yasimeni la'av l'paroi. That Yosef says that I was made as a father to Paro. Rashi says, la'av, what does it mean to be a father? Chaver and patron. A friend and a protector. That's the definition of father. And Reb Schwab says that the first person we find in Chumash who was referred to as a friend was Chira ha'Adulomi. That was Yehuda's friend, who Yehuda had to admit something very, very embarrassing because he needed his help. So he says, a reya, a friend, is someone that you can confide your most embarrassing situation to. And you can count on him to help you out. So Reb Schwab said, yes, of course there have to be rules. Yes, there have to be expectations. The ultimate goal, however, is that a child feels that my father will protect me and that I can confide in my father even my most embarrassing things. I can talk to him. You understand that if you have a paradigm that says that being a father means wait till your father gets home, you'll respond one way. And if you have a paradigm, a map that says the ultimate goal in being father is chaver and patron, then you'll have a different approach. The greater knowledge will cause you to have different experiences, which will then give you greater knowledge, which will then give you greater experiences, and then you have a spiral up, a spiral of closeness and growth. As opposed to being fixed in a box, a closed box, that gives neither yourself or anyone else the space to be able to get out. We don't want to leave mothers off the hook. Rav Hutner Zichrono Livracha, in a very beautiful piece, defines what a mother is. And he says, since we find that the first creation that a human being relies upon, the first creature that a human being relies upon, is the woman that gave birth to him. Therefore, the Torah called that woman Aim, Aleph Mem. Since the first one that we rely upon is our mother, so therefore she's called Aim. Mem, he says, is the letter which connotes a spiritual reliance. And that's combined with the letter Al, that's the letter Mem. The letter Aleph implies the first, which means that a mother is the first person that a child trusts. That's the definition of a mother, to be sure that her children trust her. Therefore, he says that in almost all the world's languages, the word for mother always has an M sound. Because mother is essentially trust. So in all the languages of the world, there's an M. In the Western languages, it's true. We had a teacher who was Korean. I asked her, in Korean, it's the same way. Maybe there's some that it's not true. I don't know. But he says in Rubam Kukulam, they have an M. They have M sound. Furthermore, he says the letter Nun at the end of a word means to do it continuously and strongly. Lomed means to learn. A lamdan is one who is always strongly learning. Rachem means to have mercy. A rachaman is one who has tremendous mercy all the time. So he says Emuna means constant mother. That's what Emuna means. Emuna is aim to some big exponent. It's mother at least squared. That's Emuna. It's mother to an extreme. So a mother might have an idea about what her role is, and that might cause her to behave in a certain way towards her children. But if she understands that the true map is one that says, I am the one who teaches my child to trust, and therefore if I want him to trust Hashem, so he's got to trust me, so that will might affect certain decisions that she has to make along the way, but only if they're following the correct map. This ability to see things from a different perspective, it's not only the source of comfort, it's not only the source of humor, it's really the source, if I can speak to this side of the room in particular, of real in-depth learning. What's real learning? What did the Gemara think in the Havamina, and what did the Gemara think in the Maskana, and what changed? Originally the Gemara was looking at it this way. Now the Gemara is looking at it this way. What changed between the two? If you can't change perspective, then you can't understand the difference between a Havamina and a Maskana. If you want to talk about the famous Chakiras of Reb Chaim, is it Chefsa Gavra? Is it Siman or Siba? Those are all things which require a change in perspective. Originally, I thought it was a din in the person. Now I see it's not a din in the person, it's a din in the lulav, and that's why the halacha comes out in the Rambam in two different places. If you can't change your perspective, then you can't understand the learning. And in terms of people, it really is the essence of Dam B'Chavschus. Dam B'Chavschus means I had you in a box, and now I'm going to look at it totally differently. I'm going to let you out of the box. And you know what happens when you let other people out of a box? So you let yourself out too. I read in Scientific American Mind magazine that they did an experiment where they put people in a box and had them take a test on creativity. And they gave the same test to people who were standing outside of a box. And the people who were standing outside of the box scored 20 points higher than the people who were sitting in the box. That's the power of a mushal. If you're sitting in a box, you're not as creative. So we have to free ourselves and free other people. We have to try to be the Rebbe Akivas, of the world, who, yes, they're crying, and you know what, they're crying for good reason. But there's another perspective. And that perspective can give hope in a better world, in a better future. It can give comfort. It can allow us to solve the problems that we created with our limited knowledge by getting new and higher knowledge. And it can enable us to create the bonds of ahava to combat the foolish luxury that we think we have of sinas chinam, of picking which Jews we like and which ones we don't, that foolish luxury that we think we have when things are good. And ultimately, as Be'ez Hashem will be reading next week, we're going to say, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, a double Nachama. But we can't be Zoche to the Nachama unless we make a commitment to be those who are misnachem because we have the ability to change perspective. So if we want the Nachama that's going to come next week, and it's really a Pella also, because unless something significant happens, the world as we can probably assume it to be, situation is not going to be that much different next Shabbos than yesterday. Probably the world situation is going to be roughly the same. So what's the Nachamu Nachamu Ami? It's still going to be a mosque in the Makom HaMikdash. It's still going to be all the problems that we had before, maybe worse. We hope not. So what's the Nechama? The Nechama is not necessarily in the world out there, but the Nechama is in the world in here. It's because of our ability to look at things differently than we did before, from a broader perspective, a deeper perspective. Giving other people a chance to get out of those confines that we placed them in. And that enables us to give them a tremendous gift, which is seeing them in terms of their potential, not limiting them to what they happen to be right this second, but seeing them in terms of what they could be. That's a source of nechama for us on a personal level, on a national level. And I think if we could do that, I think that would give Mashiach even more reason to come. Thank you for coming today.